Hello and welcome to Unliving the Lie. My name is Candace Renee Moon and I am a trauma recovery coach, and I work with adult men and women that have faced childhood trauma and adult men and women that have been in relationships with narcissists and sociopaths. Today the topic is it narcissism or is it drug addiction and alcohol addiction? Which is it? Or is it both? Um, this is really common for individuals that have any type of antisocial personality disorder and narcissism, that there's a comorbidity with their disorder, and that is substance abuse disorder. Now, I understand that most of you watching, the person that you're thinking about that is the narcissist or a sociopath, they don't have a diagnosis. And that's really common because most of these individuals that are narcissists don't think there's anything wrong with them. So they never seek help from a counselor and they don't get a diagnosis. Sometimes they do get a diagnosis, and that's usually because they're being forced to. Maybe they broke the law, they did something illegal, they went to the courts and they were court ordered to have a psych evaluation, and then they got the diagnosis. Sometimes it's even a matter of threatening the narcissist that they're going to be cut off financially. Perhaps I've seen it too, that where perhaps the family is financially supporting the narcissist and they threaten to cut the narcissist off unless they go get help, and then they go get their diagnosis. But most of the time they don't get diagnosed, and yet you still know they're a narcissist because they have all the qualities and all the traits. But they also have drug addiction or alcoholism. So you're like, are they just a drunk? Are they just, a narcissist? And sometimes, particularly with alcoholics, they can be so tricky, because I was married to an alcoholic, a non-recovered alcoholic, a person that refused to ever go into recovery. I mean, this man didn't even try to pretend to do anything for me. He didn't even try to lie to me about it. He just blunt told me he drinks because he wants to, and he's never going to stop drinking, despite the fact that he had several DUIs, got into a horrific car accident more than once in his life, and it was finally the alcoholism that took his life. Not physically, but he did something that caused a terrible accident where he died, and he was drunk. So it ultimately did end up taking his life, but it was ultimately his choice. He chose to never ever get help. It's hard to decipher sometimes between an addict and a narcissist, even though many will say, oh, my partner is a narcissist and they're also an alcoholic. And the reason I say that is because addicts display narcissistic traits, particularly alcoholics. They have a lot of narcissistic traits. And I used to think that my alcoholic husband was a narcissist. And I realized that while he was an addict, when he was deep in his addiction, he did have a lot of those selfish traits, because addicts, they have deep shame over their addiction. They don't like it. They don't like to take responsibility, but they have all these chemical things going on in their body. They're addicted to their drug of choice. And so when they get called out for the pain they're causing people in their lives from their addiction, a lot of times they will lash out, and they seem like, oh my gosh, they're a narcissist. And they possibly could be a narcissist as well. And the only way you'll know that is when they sober up. Do they still have the narcissistic traits? That's how I knew that my husband wasn't really, well, I didn't really realize that until I met a true diagnosed sociopath that I was in a relationship with, that my husband was actually just an addict. Because when he was sober, he was quiet, he was calm, and he listened to me. He never put me down. We got along. We would go antique shopping together, because there was a time before his death when we were not living together. We were separated. I had asked him to move out, and he moved in with a friend from AA, and he was sober, but the only reason he was sober is because the judge ordered him to have an ankle monitor and he could not drink. So he didn't for a couple months, and I thought, I'm going to give him a chance because I've been asking for so many years for him to just sober up. And so finally he was sober. And we had the most amazing time for those couple months when he was sober. I mean, it was just so wonderful. Like, we would do things with our son. We would go to the park. We would watch movies together. There were so many amazing things that we did together. And he was sober. And he had none of those traits. He had none of the narcissistic traits that he did when he was actively using his drug. So I know that he was not a narcissist. He was an addict. I figured it out when I compared the behavior of the abuser that I was with for 3.5 years after my husband passed, and realized the differences. Now, my abuser, he was a diagnosed sociopath, antisocial personality disorder with substance abuse disorder, and he may have been bipolar. I don't know how much that is true. The VA diagnosed him as bipolar, but I believe the VA was protecting him. I don't believe the VA wanted to give him a diagnosis of a personality disorder. It used to be that doctors were hesitant to label a person with a personality disorder because at the time when they started becoming aware of the cluster Bs, many doctors wouldn't treat them. Many doctors weren't working with cluster Bs. So because many doctors believe that there's nothing that you can do for a person that's diagnosed as sociopath and a narcissist, and there really isn't, because these individuals do not have the ability to self-reflect and to make lasting change in behaviors and to improve your life. You have to have the ability to look at yourself and be honest with yourself and take responsibility. And these individuals, these disordered people, they just don't want to take responsibility. That's the biggest thing. So many of them do have substance abuse disorder along with their personality disorder. My abuser was definitely a drug addict. His drug of choice was crack cocaine and meth when he couldn't get his crack cocaine. But he was absolutely, the drugs actually sometimes, which this is really weird, the drugs actually sometimes, and if he drank alcohol, he wasn't a big drinker, but he was a heavy marijuana smoker. And that was the only time I could ever deal with him. It actually took the edge off his awful personality when he would dope himself out with marijuana. That was actually the only way he was tolerable. When he didn't have his nicotine and his weed, oh my God, he was an absolute nightmare. So when this man was sober, he was awful. And that's kind of how you know you've got a sociopath on your hands. And not that I'm saying and I'm condoning medicating yourself with marijuana and medicating yourself with drugs. I'm not condoning that, but sometimes it's tricky when you're dealing with an addict. It's so easy because people that are addicts, they're putting chemicals in their body. They're altering their brain chemistry. Their personalities are changing. They're doing things. They're acting certain ways that you've never seen them behave. And it can be so traumatizing for those around the addict. And you're like, where did my son go? Where did my sister go? Like, who is this person? That's usually the case. Usually they're a person dealing with trauma, or they are a person that is predisposed genetically to have addiction. There is a gene that science has discovered that lets you know you are predisposed to having addictions, and sometimes there's just something will trigger it. I don't think they have the answer to why that gene gets triggered, but sometimes that gene gets triggered and they are more susceptible for becoming an addict. And usually with alcoholics, and I'm not an expert on it, I'm not going to say that, but usually with people that are alcoholics, that's what their issue is. They're an alcoholic. And when you take the alcohol away, 9 times out of 10, I've discovered that they come back to being a normal human being. But if they're a narcissist and an alcoholic, they don't come back to being a normal human being. I usually have found that the narcissists and the sociopaths, alcohol is not enough for them. They get into the hardcore drugs. That's just my experience. Like, I know we all have our experiences and every situation is different. I just know I've had many alcoholics in my life, and most of them are just addicts. They're not narcissists. They're just addicts that don't want to take responsibility for their addiction, and they don't want to be clean, and that's their choice. But what if you have a narcissist and an addict? How do you know? Well, you know that when the drug isn't there, that the narcissistic behavior is still there. And oftentimes the narcissistic behavior is even worse, because then remember, narcissists and sociopaths, they want to portray themselves as all good. Remember, we talked in a couple other videos back that they don't have whole object relations. They don't see things objectively, and they see everything as all good or all bad. And because they, by nature, refuse to take responsibility and refuse to see flaws within themselves, they only want to see themselves as all good. And they want to portray themselves as all good. My abuser wanted to portray himself as all good at all costs, but yet he knew he was addicted to crack cocaine. He was also a sex addict. He had a underground, dark, perverted sex life and sex proclivities. And he had this secret thing, but he hid that. He wanted that to remain hidden, and in the outside world to see him as this upstanding, wonderful guy. So he would, when he sobered up, when he would come down from his drugs, so he would go and do his drugs. And I think I was about to say that and I got distracted. It was interesting when he was doing his drugs, in the middle of, like, if he was smoking crack or he was doing meth, he was actually nice. And I don't want to even say nice, because that's really messed up. I don't even know how to say it. But he was actually not necessarily as vicious to me. Let's just say that. He wasn't as vicious as he normally was. He wasn't gaslighting me. I mean, he coerced me. He used coercion. He used substance use coercion. He coerced me into drugs. He gave me drugs against my will. He drugged me. Which in my mind, when you coerce a person to do drugs and they say no, it's just like sex. Just because you beg and beg and beg and manipulate and coerce, and you get a woman or a man to say yes to you, that's not consent. You had to manipulate them to get consent. And you didn't even get consent. It's not consent. You had to manipulate them and make them give in through force and manipulation. So my abuser actually forced crack cocaine and meth onto me many times, and I never consented to it. Now, if you ask him, he'll tell you I loved it and I was having a good time, and I loved all the rape and all the sexual torture. I was just like loving all of that, and I was having a wonderful time with him. Anytime I tried to tell him, like, no, I hated that, that was not fun, this man was so delusional. So he would coerce me into doing these things against my will. It's no different than rape. He forced something into my body against my will. He forced something upon my person against my will. And to me, that's the same category as rape. And this happened to me systemically through the entire relationship. And then there was sexual assaults and sexual things that I did not consent to, that I had no choice but to participate in. That is rape. That is not getting consent. So my abuser, while he wasn't, when he was doing the drugs, like I said, he wasn't as vicious. It was a different kind of evil. I can't describe it. It was a completely different kind of evil, that it was like two different people. So when he was doing the hard drugs, like his crack and his meth, is when he would force me to do those drugs with him. Not every time, because there were many times he wanted to go do really bad things with underage people, just do bad things, and his sick, disgusting underground sexual life that I was no part of. And he even knew, like, that line I would never cross. He knew that. He knew I would not consent to he just knew. And so he'd run off and go do his really debased, perverted things and his crack and his meth and the hookers and all that. He would go off and do that. But when he was at home, he would get in a mood to force me to take these things against my will and force me to do these sexual things I did not want to do and participate in these things that I did not want to do and torture me for hours and hours and hours. And I never understood what it was until I came across an article written by a domestic violence advocate out of Chicago, and I don't remember her name. I'll put her name down in the comments. But it's called substance use coercion, where an abuser will use substances to coerce you and to abuse you. They will drug you. They can also sabotage your sobriety. So maybe you are somebody that is an addict and you struggle with alcohol, or you struggle with some other type of drug. Your abuser is not going to support you in your sobriety. They're going to coerce you and continue to feed you these drugs and alcohol. That one is very, very, very common. These abusive men will deliberately choose women that they know struggle with addiction to exploit them and to use them because they view them as not human. They view them as a dispendable person that nobody cares about, and so they will use that person. There's so many insidious, disgusting, evil ways that these monsters will use substances to abuse and coerce their victims. But for me, because I knew he had the diagnosis as a sociopath later down in the relationship, it all came together at the end. But during it, he did not have his diagnosis. He was just diagnosed from the VA as bipolar. And I always thought, there's just so much more to this than bipolar. There's something so evil and psychotic about this individual. And yes, when he was doing his marijuana, he was calm. And if he had beer or alcohol, he was calm, and it would actually take the edge off of him. And he was actually a nice person. I know I'm not condoning it, but that's what happened. That was the reality. Now, most alcoholics, when they drink, they're evil and bad and they're horrible. And then when they come down, they're horrible because they want more of their alcohol. So you've got to really consult with professionals and get these diagnoses before you can flat out say, well, my husband is an alcoholic and he's a narcissist. It's just tricky. And this is just my opinion. You can take it for what it's worth. You may not agree with me. You may say, I know for a fact, I just know. And you have to trust your gut instinct. Okay. So if what I'm saying doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. I understand. But in my experience, most of the time, alcoholics are just alcoholics. They're addicts. They're not usually. And I know there's exceptions that they can be. So I'm not saying that if you have a diagnosis for alcohol and narcissism, that is your truth. And I'm not going to say it's not true. I've just found the majority, they're alcoholics, and they're probably bipolar is more likely, or BPD. Narcissists and sociopaths, for me, they tend to go for the harder drugs, that they want the bigger rush. Alcohol is not enough for them, because these people that have substance abuse disorder and sex addictions and any type of they want gratification, and nothing is good enough. They want to, people that have addictions to sex and porn and drugs, they continually look for that high, and they want the high. It's called chasing the dragon. And they continue to chase the dragon, and nothing is ever good enough. So they will get more into the harder drugs. That's just my observation and my opinion. Take that for what it's worth. But alcoholics are tricky. They're tricky because a lot of times when they sober up and they really take their sobriety seriously, all of those personality traits just go away. And that's just what I've noticed. So make sure if you can get a diagnosis and you can get your person that you think is an alcoholic and a narcissist, if they can get a diagnosis, I don't know, maybe if you convince them to go into rehab for their alcoholism, you could get the psychologist hopefully to give those dual diagnoses. Because alcoholics, a lot of times, they're going to fuck up. They're going to go get a DUI. They're going to do something stupid where they have to sit before a judge. They usually always do, because their drug is legal. There's an arrogance to alcoholics. There's an arrogance to them because their drug is legal. My former husband, who was an alcoholic, thought he was above drug addicts and people that got high on weed. And it's like, dude, you are an alcoholic. You're putting a chemical in your body and getting drunk. You are no different than that person that's hitting meth, in my opinion. you're putting a chemical in your body, you're altering yourself because you want to numb yourself out, just like that meth addict wants to numb themselves out too. Like alcoholics have an arrogance to them. They think that they're and our culture is their drug is legal and it's acceptable. Drinking is a very acceptable thing in our culture. And I'm not going to go off into the weeds on this and my opinions about that. I think you guys understand where I'm coming from. But most of the time when an alcoholic will get help, they're being forced to, and often often every alcoholic I've known has at one time in their life had to face a judge, had to go to court. And so if you're a narcissistic person you believe is an alcoholic too, they're gonna fuck up and go before a judge, and just hope that that judge makes them go to rehab or something and they can get a diagnosis, and then you can know for sure, okay, I'm dealing with an addict, I'm dealing with an alcoholic, because you have to figure this out. And I know sometimes you can't, and that's okay. But if you're with a person and you're married to somebody and they're willing to get help for their alcoholism, you can find out usually through a rehab facility if you're just dealing with substance abuse disorder. And most of the time that's just what you're dealing with. And I'm not saying it's any worse or any better, but it actually is better than finding out they're a sociopath or a narcissist as well, because you know that without the substance, at least they're not disordered and evil. At least you know for sure it was the drug or the alcohol causing it. And you know the behaviors, if they choose sobriety, will go away. But most sociopaths and narcissists, they're going to choose the hard drugs. They want that rush. Sorry, my dog heard a motorcycle go by. They want that rush because nothing's ever good enough. And they usually come with sex addiction and anything to give them. Narcissists are empty people. They're empty people that seek satisfaction and stimulation and gratification. They have no capacity for empathy and intimacy and love. So they're going to seek the drug to give them this false sense of euphoria because they don't know how to have that within themselves. They don't know how to have peace and happiness within themselves, contentment. Narcissistic people get very bored. They want their stimulation. So, and like I said, they start chasing the dragon. They try this drug, the marijuana. Oh, that's not enough. So I'm going to try some cocaine. Oh, that cocaine's not enough. I'm going to try some crack, or I'm going to try some heroin. That's what they usually do. That's just what I notice. And there's a lot of comorbidity with these disordered cluster Bs. They end up with substance abuse disorder and drug disorders. I cannot tell you how many people have come to me telling me that the same exact stories that I have had, where they have had a partner who's also a drug addict and a narcissist. And it's really, really a horrible mix. Like I said, my abuser, when he was doing his crack or his meth, there were moments when he seemed okay and normal. Like the drug almost got rid of that edge of that vicious, angry, impatient sociopath. But not really. It just gave the illusion because he forced me to do drugs. He coerced me to do drugs. But the coercion, interestingly, the coercion happened before he took the drug. So the coercion was happening when he wasn't on the drug. The coercion happened when he was in that vicious, manipulative, sociopath, sober person. That was the height of his evilness when he wasn't on the drug. So the coercion and the control and the force happened while he was sober. And then when he would get me on the drug, get me to take it, and he would threaten me, it was just like there was no way I could say no. Like I would be tortured if I didn't give in. This is a horrible, horrible, horrible form of abuse, and it's incredibly common. It's just not talked about so much because the women and the victims that have this happen to them, it's primarily women that have this happen. And I'm not saying that there's not a man that couldn't have this happen too, because there probably is. But when you're forced and coerced, there's shame, particularly as a woman and as a mother with children. They will shame you and they will attack. They will use it. So they've coerced you into doing crack cocaine, and they forced you to do these sexual things you did not consent to. They raped you, assaulted you, and violated you on so many levels. First, they violate you by forcing substances into your body, and then they violate you and force you and coerce you into doing sex acts that you say no to. No is no. Like, you have the right to feel safe in your own body. And so you might be doubting yourself and saying, well, I did smoke the meth with him. And maybe you're addicted to meth, okay? Maybe you're addicted and they preyed upon your addiction and they coerced you. Maybe you wanted to stay sober. Maybe you didn't want to go back to meth and they coerced you. That's still against your will. And there's still, even if, let's just say you did it with them together and you weren't coerced because you struggle with an addiction. But I guarantee you probably were coerced and you were probably put in a situation underhandedly by the sociopath or the narcissist to get you to do the drugs, because you probably would not have been doing it because you're probably trying to clean your life up. But they don't give a shit because they're evil. And so you think, okay, but I willingly did the drugs and I've struggled with the drugs in my past. Like, I've done them in the past. I struggle with addiction. So I have to take responsibility for that. Okay, maybe you do. Yes. Okay. That's a whole other thing. But you don't take responsibility for them forcing you to do sex acts. You don't take responsibility if they force you to have sex with other men for money. You don't take responsibility for that, because that's how these men will start pimping out women. That's how the sex trafficking starts. They get you hooked on drugs, because sex trafficking doesn't happen by these men driving down in a car and grabbing you off the street. It's not how it works. They groom you. They take you young. They groom you. They love bomb you. And then they get you, some of them will get you hooked on drugs and they will coerce you into drugs. This is like, there's so many layers to the evilness of the substance use coercion. So that's how sex trafficking starts. So you're not responsible for that. You are not to blame for that. The narcissistic sociopath, the evil predator, is to blame for that because they're evil. And it doesn't get talked about because of the deep shame. Our culture shames addicts. Our culture looks at addicts as subhuman. And I know this for a fact. I will stand by that statement 1000%. I've had a lot of experience with people in my life that have struggled with addiction, and our culture looks at them as subhuman, weak individuals. So there is so much shame in it. My abuser knew I was not a drug addict. I'd never done a drug like that in my life ever. And he knew what he was doing. He was so evil, and he coerced me into doing it and forced me. I didn't have a choice. Like, I did not have a choice. People will say, well, you did his family. You did the drugs with him. You're just as bad. It's like, really? Does your son tell you the truth to the story? I did not do drugs with him. I was coerced. That is such a different thing. It's all about intentions and his mindset. It was not like I was a willing participant. I was an abuse victim that had no choice, that I was afraid to say no to this person. I could not physically fight off this person. I was locked in my bedroom with him for hours and hours, and I was not allowed to leave. Like, this man should be in prison. If I wasn't so trauma bonded to this person, he should be in prison. And there's many, many, many of them that should be in prison. And they are the sociopaths, the malignant narcissists, because a normal human being, even if they struggle with addiction, they really don't want to destroy other people. Someone that's just an addict is destroying themselves because they hate themselves and they feel so ashamed. And they don't want to stop because they don't want to feel the pain. Now, a sociopath and a narcissist, they're doing the drugs so that it takes the edge off, so they can act out their evil, and so they can get some sort of stimulation and gratification and some sort of high, because they're dead and empty. It's like their sick way of trying to feel like a human, because they're non-human. And there is a spiritual aspect to that. I absolutely believe these are demonic entities inside these people. They are demonic entities, and the demonic entities love the drugs and they love the sexual exploitation of females. Demonic entities are very well known for that. If you've studied any type of demonology and that and understand demonic entities, I'm not trying to freak people out, but the narcissists and the sociopaths, the reason they all have so many similar traits and they all act the same, it's because they're demonic entities. Now, an addict can get demonic attachments. They can get demonic attachments and entity attachments through getting so drunk and being so passed out that these things will attach to them because their defenses are down and they're not connected, and their soul, they're disembodied. So that will happen too. None of this is good. None of these things are good things to be doing. I feel it's really important to talk about this topic because I see so many people talking about the alcoholism and narcissism together, and a lot of victims are automatically assuming that their narcissistic partner is also a narcissist. And I'm just cautioning you to be careful with that and to actually see if you can get a diagnosis. That would be the best scenario, because you could be dealing with someone that's just an alcoholic, and you're now trying to treat narcissism and alcoholism when maybe the entire problem is only alcoholism. And once the drug is gone, there is none of those narcissistic traits. But with a narcissist, the alcohol and the drugs be gone, they're still a narcissist. And there's many narcissists and sociopaths that don't do drugs. I have known some that do not do drugs and alcohol, and they are psychotic. And they will choose a female partner that they know perfectly well struggles with alcoholism. Like, they will go to a bar specifically to prey upon a woman that is struggling with alcoholism. Because why would they do such a thing? Because they can control her in their sick, twisted, disgusting minds. They want a woman that they can get high and drunk. Why do they want that? Maybe they have sick, disgusting, perverted fantasies about having sex with a woman that's incapacitated. Maybe they want to have other men pay them to have sex with her and to do things with her. And she can't fight back because she's so intoxicated and they've given her drugs. I mean, this shit is disturbing, but it is very, very real, and it happens. This is why I don't, you just have to be careful and have awareness. I talk about these things to bring awareness. My experience was my ex-sociopath exploited me sexually and forced drugs on me. And I remember feeling so angry at myself. And I knew, like, I felt like such a hypocrite in my life because it wasn't me, but yet he made me feel like I was going along with it. I wasn't ready yet to completely say that I was being abused. I wasn't able to see that until he was long gone, and I was able to start my healing journey and realize, oh my God, I was being abused. I was being raped. I was being forced to take drugs and do things against my will. That was the ultimate evil and the ultimate betrayal. It was abuse. But when it was happening, I was so confused, like, because people will say, well, you did the drugs. You did it. You did it, Candace. You did it. Now, nobody has said that to me except for his mother, which I don't care. Like, he used that as a tool to try to shame me when he was in jail. His last ditch effort to try to triangulate me did not work, because at first I was kind of upset, and his mother sent me this angry message. You've been doing drugs with my son this whole time. And I did send her a message. I said, well, I'm sorry that, you're upset with me, and I'm sorry that I did do the drugs, and I'm sorry that I went along with him and did the drugs. Like, I was apologizing to her. And then I said, but, he's not really telling you the full story. I never ever would have done such a drug. I never knew about such drugs. They were never in my life until him. And I didn't really have a choice. And I didn't go into the details about how he had abused me, because at the time I was still trauma bonded, and I didn't want to have a pointless conversation with this woman telling her what her son was, because she knew perfectly well what her son was. She knew everything he had done to me. So I didn't feel that it was necessary to explain any of that. And that's all I said to her. And I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel like I owed her anything. I explained to her that I understand that you feel like I betrayed you, and you feel like, because from her perspective, according to him, I was doing the same thing, and she felt like I was deceiving her because our relationship was based on a lie. I did cover for him and lie for him to his family many, many, many times I covered for him. And that was her big problem. She was mad that I covered for him. And I guess I get it. That's fine. You can be mad at me for that. But I didn't do anything wrong. I was being abused. So at the time when I was messaging her, I felt guilty for not telling her the truth. I felt guilty for covering for his vile behaviors. And she still doesn't know everything. And I never felt like it was that necessary for me to do all of that. Like, I just told her what I told her, and that was that. And I didn't feel like I owed her anything else. I'm a grown woman. And I told my abuser, he didn't know that I already knew he had told his parents. And so he thinks that I'm going to be devastated. He thinks that he did something. Like, he thinks that he got revenge on me because he exposed me to his family. Like, really? Like, I don't care. Like, I do, but I don't. Like, honestly, I didn't care if she was judging me or not. But I also had a relationship with her at the time. And so I felt like I was going to talk to her about it because she felt like I betrayed her by not, because I did lie to them. That's why I felt obligated to talk to her, because I did lie to them. I did cover for him so many times. I was one of his flying monkeys in the beginning of our relationship. I just didn't know I was one of his. I didn't know I was one of his flying monkeys, but I was. So those were things that I didn't understand, and so I did kind of like apologize for all of that. But the being for the drug thing and all of the issues, I don't owe them anything. I don't. I was abused. And he thought he did something. He thought I was going to crawl under a hole and die of embarrassment and shame. Because if he went and told the people that loved me and cared about me, he knew they would not judge me. He knew they would blame him. He knew the people that loved me and knew me would question him. They would say, "What do you mean Candace did crack cocaine? Did you make her do it?" Because none of my friends liked him. So he knew that it wasn't going to work. He was not going to be able to triangulate me with my own people because none of them liked him. And if he did try to tell them and talk to them, they would question him and they'd want to get to the truth because they would know that's out of my character. They would know Candace doesn't do drugs. She doesn't do that. What are you talking about? What did you do? That's what they would say. And he knew that. So he thought I was going to be devastated that his parents were now mad at me. I'm like, I don't care if they're mad or not. That makes no difference to me. I said what I said to your mother, and that's all that matters. And so anyways, I'm getting to the story. So he's in his drug rehab facility, and he thinks he's getting his revenge on me. And he doesn't know that I already know that he told his parents, because one of his cousins told me, "Oh yeah, he told his mom and dad about you and him doing drugs and blah blah blah." So I knew, okay, I know what he's up to. So I wasn't worried about it. I didn't care. And then he says to me, I knew he did it to try to hurt me and triangulate me by his reaction. When I said to him, I was waiting for him to bring it up. He's like, so he's trying to bring it up. He's pretending to be so concerned. And Candace, so I finally told my parents the truth. And I go, what? I'm waiting for it. I knew what he was saying. I go, the truth? He's like, yes, I told them the truth about you. I said, really? You told them the truth about me? He's like, yes, I told them that you did drugs with me, that we did drugs together. And I said, oh, interesting. I said, did you tell them that you coerced me into doing them, that I never would have known what they were if you hadn't have tricked me and given them to me against my will and lied to me about what I was smoking? I thought I was smoking marijuana, and I was naive. Okay, guys, I was naive. I thought I was smoking marijuana and it ended up being crack. Did you tell them that? Like how you tricked me? And he's like, got really angry, said a bunch of things because he instantly changed from that. I really had to be honest with my parents, Candace. And then when I didn't respond in the way that he wanted, he got angry because I said that to him, and he's like, I said, did you not tell them that he's like, Candace, you are a liar just like me. And he started saying that. I said, but did you not tell your parents that you made me lie to them? Like our entire relationship was based on a lie, and that you forced me to lie to them so that you could have this false front of your life, so you could hide behind me and my life and look like a legitimate human. Even though you're destroying me, you're hiding behind me. I said, did you tell them? Like, you based our entire relationship on a lie. And he went ballistic, but he wasn't done going ballistic because I wasn't done with him yet. He went ballistic, Candace. And he acted like that never happened. Like our entire relationship was a lie because he wanted it to be a lie. He threatened me and told me I was never to tell his parents anything and that I was not to get close to his parents. He was terrified of me being close to his mother because he was terrified that the truth would come out because he knew I was an honest person. He knew I was who I was, whoever I was talking to. I did not censor myself with people. So he had to threaten me and I protected him. I protected him. And I'm not, I was abused. This was not like I just chose to cover for him because I was the same as him. I was covering for him because I was an abuse victim. And I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want my ass beat. I didn't want to be hurt or raged at. I didn't want any of my children to be hurt. So I did what I thought I needed to do to keep myself protected. And he knew that. Like, he knew that. He exploited that within me. But so he decided to rewrite the story, to change the script when it suited him. And when I told him, I said, did you tell them, like you made it out like I'm a junkie like you, and I've been lying that I've had this drug habit that I never had, and I don't even have. Like, I don't have any desire to do those things ever. And he got so angry, and his response told me so much about his motivation. He wasn't trying to like come clean. He wasn't trying to confess to his family and be a better person. He was just trying to triangulate me and hurt me. Because I had called because my boss had called the police for him physically assaulting me, and the courts had forced him into rehab because I went to the prosecutor and I asked the prosecutor to do that. So he thought he was going to get revenge on me by telling his parents. He underestimated me, that I was so invested. Like, he thinks that he thought that I thought like him. Like, I'm not invested in what your parents think of me. I'm not invested in that at all. It doesn't matter to me. And when I said that to him, he went into an absolute rage. Because I remember talking to one of my girlfriends about it, and she actually helped me process it because I was bothered. I'm like, he went and told them like I'm a junkie like him when that's not the truth, and he knows that. My friend was just like, Candace, why do you care? She goes, you've got your own mom. She goes, that ain't your mom. And that, my friend saying that to me snapped me out of my cognitive dissonance. And I snapped out of it. I'm like, you're right. Why am I worried? That isn't my mom. I don't care. And so I was waiting. I couldn't wait for him to finally confess to me that he told them. And I wanted to see how it was going to play out. So I got to play him, is what I'm saying. I got to play him for the first time. And it was so wonderful. I didn't know how he was going to play it out. I didn't know what he was going to do. And I just waited, and he did not disappoint. He did exactly what I knew he would do. He went into a rage because I said, I don't care. But I also pointed out to him, you made me do all this. Everything was based on a lie. I was told to lie to you because his point was, my parents are absolutely devastated that you lied to them. And I'm like, but you forced me to lie to them. You threatened me that if I ever told the truth, if I ever talked to your mother about anything, that you would leave me and you would ruin me and you would tell it, like you threatened so many things. Like you threatened me that if I ever told your mother anything or your parents anything, you threatened harm onto me. So now you're sitting here rewriting what I know to be true, trying to gaslight me and make me think I'm crazy and make me doubt my sanity to fit your narrative. You lied to them. They were so devastated. No, they were not. Maybe they were devastated, but I don't care. You're making it out to be something that it is not, to try to triangulate me and try to make me feel bad, and I don't feel bad. So when you take their power away from them, so the moral of the story is, I say all of that to say this. I said a lot. This was one of the most traumatic parts of my abuse. I just kind of talk about it. I don't talk about it that often. So I say all of that to say this. He was he was trying to hurt me and triangulate me, and he was trying to get even with me and be the victim and to get revenge because I held him accountable, one, for his drug addiction, and two, for his domestic violence and his abuse. I was involved the legal system to make him accountable, and his parents thought that I was using the legal system to get revenge, but no, I was holding him accountable for what he was doing, forcing me to do illegal drugs, physically assaulting me, sexually assaulting me, doing all kinds of awful things to me. And I was holding him accountable. And so then he has the nerve, because that's what they do. They're going to set you up. They use the substance use coercion as a way to set you up and shame you. And this very reason that I'm describing with my story, this very reason is why so many don't come forward and talk about it. This is why it's not talked about nearly enough. And that is because the victims, which are primarily female, are ashamed and afraid, or they themselves suffer from an addiction, so they don't feel like anyone is going to believe them because they're known to be an addict, and they don't think anyone's going to believe them, and often people do not believe them. Often people will be cruel and mean and say, well, she had it coming because it's her fault for being drunk, or it's her fault for doing drugs. That is what our society does. So there's a lot of shame in it, even for someone like me who was not a drug addict and had never done such a thing, that I was worried and concerned in some point, and he did try to use that against me. And he counted on that. I was looking at my dog. He counted on that, and he tried to do that, and he tried to shame me. But substance use coercion is a really insidious thing. It's a really bad thing. So if you're dealing with a sociopath that also has a drug addiction, your best thing is to get out of that relationship. I'm just going to tell you, your best thing is to get out of that relationship, because if they are also a narcissist and also a sociopath, their chances of getting help and recovery are very slim. They may be able to go a few months at a time and not do their drug, but that demon comes calling. It always does. That demon will always come calling. And I remember telling my abuser, that's one of the last things I told him. He was acting like he was so superior. And I said, just remember, the demon's going to come calling. Don't sit here and act like you're something. You try to pretend to be something. You forget that I know you. And that demon's going to come calling. And they always do come calling. So don't be fooled and hoovered back into your narcissistic abuser if they call you and say, you've been no contact. And they reach out to you and they say, I've been sober now for 6 weeks, Candace. I'm doing so well. Please give me another chance. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. The demons aren't going to let that go. Don't fall for it. Just don't. Your best bet is to stay no contact, to get away from them. And like I said too in the beginning, if you can find out if your person that is a narcissist, you believe they're a narcissist and they're also an alcoholic, and I don't know, I don't tell people what to do with their individual relationships. But I did say, if you know they're a narcissist and they've been diagnosed, and you know that they're a drug addict, that is a hopeless situation. But if you're not sure if they're an alcoholic or a drug addict and a narcissist, find out if you can, because it can be treated differently. There's hope. Basically what I'm saying, there's hope. So if they're just an addict, there's a little bit of hope that you can hope. You can hope that they want to change, and you can hope that they want to do better. But when it's a narcissist and an addict, there is no hope. It makes it even worse. I have nothing positive to say to anybody that is with a sociopathic narcissist that is also a drug addict. There's nothing positive or uplifting that I have to say. Stop giving them your compassion. Get away, get safe. If you want someone to talk to, if you related to anything that I said and you have experienced any of this and you want to talk, send me an email, connect with me, message me. You're not alone. This is a real thing. This happens more than you would like, the more than you realize. So All right, we went a little long today. Today was a long one. I had a lot to say. I kind of went off into the story time a little bit. I will do that sometimes when I'm talking about these topics, and I will get flashbacks in the middle of talking about these topics, and I will go off into story time. So I went off into a little story time today. I hope that was okay. But please let me know if you would like assistance, you would like help. You can join my private peer support Facebook group. You can work with me one-on-one if you like. Go to my website, check it out. Check it out. Come find me on TikTok, find me on Instagram, and um, email me anything, even if you just want someone to hear you and to validate you. So, all right, everybody. We will talk again soon, and I thank you for your support. If you know anybody that you think would relate to this, please share this. Subscribe, like, share with anyone that you think would benefit from this. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk again soon. Namaste.